Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast, where we discuss all sorts of things Germanic heathenry related. My name is Jesse, and I am your host. Let's get into it. Well, all right, everybody. Hail and hello to everyone. Hello to Shini on YouTube. First comment of the night. Hail and hello to you. Thanks for tuning in and commenting wherever you're watching from in the vast, wide, World Wide Web places. This is our monthly sort of town hall / heathen chat. Getting on here to just hear from the people. I do monthly live streams as part of the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast broadcast. So, welcome to Scaldic Works. Hello there, Blake, who says greetings over here on YouTube. So, when this does come out later in the week, we're going to hear from our listeners on Spotify and other platforms, hopefully. But if you guys are listening to this, guys and gals out there are listening to this on the Spotify or any of the audio platforms when it comes out, just be aware that I do these monthly, usually the third or fourth Monday of each month, where you can come onto the Midgard Musings Facebook or YouTube channel, Facebook page or YouTube channel, and interact with me live and in real time, just like Adam Cage here over on Facebook says, "Hello, brother." Hello, brother. Back to you, my man. You are one of the few who I will reciprocate the title of brother to online. It's few and far between those who I will do that comfortably with. So yeah, well, hail and welcome to this week's live stream and this week's podcast. So this will become this week's podcast. So if you're having to dip out, in or out of the live stream, and you want to, go take care of things or do whatever you need to do tonight, then feel free to do so. But it is a live stream, so anything that you guys have on your minds, topics that you would like to talk about, definitely feel free to share them in the comments. I'll get to them as I can. On my socials, if you go to my pin posts or bio page or whatever it is nowadays, I don't know. It'll tell you, where you can follow me at. The Linktree link that's usually posted in the show notes of the podcast when it goes on the audio platforms. It tells you where you can find me. So it's mostly Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and of course Patreon. So for those of you that don't know, if you're watching this live now, this is your once a month opportunity to see me live on video. The rest of the time, the video versions of the podcast are pre-recorded and shared only to my Patreon platform. And for a $1 pledge at the Carl tier, you get access to that. You don't have to renew it if you don't want to every month. You can just pledge the $1 to catch a video episode, watch me and the guests that I may have on my show at the time. And then, you don't have to renew it. So it's totally up to you how you want to continue your pledge of support at that tier. But most of my video stuff is only on Patreon, except for these monthly live streams. So if you want to see my video stuff, head over to patreon.com/MidgardMusings and pledge your support for just $1 if you want to watch it. So we're going to just jump right into it. I did have something that I wanted to talk a little bit about. And this actually came to me in the form of an email. So if you're wanting to get in touch with me via email, to write in a request for the show, topic of discussion, thought or idea or something, you have two ways of doing so. You can email me. It's midgardmusingstn@gmail.com. Or you can call in to the Midgard Musings hotline or the Random Heathen Ramblings hotline. It's a Google Voice number. I don't answer it in real time, so it's not like you can call in during the show and talk to me on the phone. But you can call in to that and leave a voicemail. It is 615-671-9832. Call in with your ideas, with your thoughts. Even after, if you listen or watch a podcast and you want to write in or call in and just leave your thoughts, you can do so. And I'd be happy to field them and take them. I do get some voicemails from time to time that are very detailed and very intricate, and it's more like an awareness sort of thing, and I absorb it and I think about it and I come back and I revisit it later. So it's not always, that something that's going to necessarily get aired or put onto the show. But yeah, think about it. That's what you want to do. So comment down below. Let me know where you're watching from tonight on this live stream, which platform you're on. We got a few folks here from Facebook and YouTube watching tonight, like Adam, who posted something, but for some reason the thing that I'm showing does not show what it is that you posted, Adam. So I don't know. Could be a meme. Could be a could be anything really. Anyway, so here's what I wanted to talk about. I had Blake over here from Scald It Works, who's watching on the YouTube side of things. He emailed me, was it last week? And asked a question that I thought would be great to kind of post here for the community. And get all of you guys and gals here to weigh in. I'm going to probably be talking and reciting some things that are loosely mentioned in the email that Scald at Work sent in. But the title of the email was, "Can one person serve or live in between multiple kindreds / tribes?" Oh yeah, Adam is watching in from Clarksville, Tennessee. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you and the family are well. Give my best and my love. So thank you for watching. But can one person serve or live in between multiple kindreds or tribes? So the email body is as such. It says, "Hey Jesse, love your last video on the kindred / tribes. This was, I think, in reference to my last podcast about why do modern heathen kindreds / tribes, whatever, fail to succeed." So he's referencing that, saying, "Love your last video on that." On the heels of that topic, I was curious as to what your opinion of someone who decides to live in between or serve multiple existing kindred / tribes. It says, "I know that in the time of our pre-Christian ancestors, there were people who had roles that allowed them to live outside of and travel between and serve multiple communities within their area, such as the Voiva or Vidki, shaman, skald, etc., that would go from village to village and offer their services as part of their trade." So let me get caught up here on some comments. Yeah, I can't decide, so I usually revert to YouTube. That's cool, Blake. On Scald It Works says couldn't decide. Oh, you sent a gift, Adam. Well, thank you for the gift. Thank you very much. Unexpected and unnecessary for sure, but thank you in kind. And you are doing well. Great. So yeah. So this was an interesting thing, when this was sent in, can one person serve or live in between multiple kindreds or tribes? I wouldn't say necessarily torn, but I'm always inclined to find an answer to certain things that people send me or ask me that is going to, if there is a source material, if there's any existing source material that can answer the question based off of historical background or backing, rather than just giving my 2 cents. And now, so much of what I do is contained or embodied around historical backing, but it's not so deeply rooted in it that I'm oblivious to the modern applications and the modern existence of things that we're in now. So I kind of hover between the two uh, spectrums. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not what I would consider a reconstructionist. I don't only think of the historical sides of things, but I do lean heavily into it. So I wanted to explore and think a little bit about this question, right? Can one person serve multiple tribes slash kindreds? And my immediate response is, well, if an individual, if a person is not oathed or sworn fealty or troth to any one specific group, then they are at free will to be as accessible as they wish to be to any group or kindred or tribe or whatever. You know what I mean? So if they want to, be accessible for the services that they are specializing in, whether it be, divination, or whatever, then that's one thing. But one of the things that I keep going back to is like, well, what is the purpose? Where does the why of it fit in? So I tend to lean back into the purpose of things. Like, why does this question get asked? Why are we looking into this reasoning of, can a person do this or that? It's almost like there's the need, or there's an interest, at least to some degree, to have a person, I don't want to say restricted to one decision or the other, but you kind of understand maybe where I'm coming from, right? Like, well, why would we need to think along these lines if there wasn't a question in the minds of people or a person, whether or not they can exist or serve between multiple kindreds, multiple tribes? We live in an interesting time of history, like we live in an interesting time in the sense that heathenry, specifically, was at one point in time a very, close, insular, clan only tribe, very, small insular groups of people. And we live in a time, now we live in a, we exist in a time now where we're a bit more spread out, so we have access to things. We have access to people, we have access to communities that our ancient ancestors would never have been able to have access to, without the presence of modern technology as we have it now and today. So looking at the question of, can one person serve or live in between multiple kindred or tribes, I think without breaching any sort of contractual social obligation, then yes, of course, people can be free to live within the extension of their capacities, what they can and are willing to do for people outside of their inner circle. They're free to do with as they so choose. But again, being the type of person that I am, and looking at things from a bit of a historical angle of things, I wanted to look back and see what I could find that related to Blake's comment, that said, there were people in the times of our pre-Christian ancestors who had roles that allowed them to live outside of, the inner group, that and travel between places. So I wanted to look at, where do we see historical mentions of these types of people, and what were those people, right? What were they called? So at the end of this episode, there's going to be some links that are shared either down in the description of this video, and for those of you that are listening to this later on, after this airs live, in the show notes of this podcast, that are going to point you back into some very specific areas of focus when it comes to context and when it comes to source material. So in Blake's email, he mentions, Volvas, Vitkis, shamans, skalds, etc. Right? He's using terms that are kind of very specific, but also all over the place in the same time. When I say all over the place, when I have to call attention to the fact that the term shaman doesn't get used in Germanic contexts at all. Uh, Siberian, Slavic, other cultures, and whatever have coined the term or used the term shaman. Doesn't exist in, I think, the Germanic or Norse sources. Volva, yes. Seidr, Seith Kona, Spa Kona, Seith Mother, Spa Mother, yes. Right? And we're going to get into some of that in a bit. Vidki, yeah, sure. The Scald, I think, and I unfortunately don't have a source that I can just revert to right off the top of my head, but I think that the role of the Scald was not so much as that of a traveling one as it was the position under the king's retinue, under royal retinue. They had a very important role in societies that were directly associated with the nobility. So if they traveled, they were done so. It was done so under the king's retinue. All right, so they were representatives of nobility to go out and be that or whatever. So that particular thing, Scald, I don't think necessarily had a traveler's or outside of society's role. I think they were pretty much woven into the societal structure of the nobility, and they were under the king or whatever's retinue. We got Workout Buddy 111 on YouTube that says Eric Wordweaver Shervin said once or twice that there is no Asa Pope. And I wonder that as a solitary practitioner, are there any collectively admired figures in governance, like positions, other than in our own hearth cult? Thanks for commenting there, Workout Buddy 111. I am friends with Eric Wordweaver Shervin and have been an admirer of his work on YouTube, and am familiar with your terminology where he says that he definitely does not put himself up in any sort of position as the, quote unquote, Asa Pope, this sort of ultimate authority in modern heathenry. There are definitely people, I think, now and today in modern times that have a strong refrain. They have strong refrain or reputation abroad that people look to and lean on for good resource, good advice. But when it comes to heathenry, like we got to think of the sense of where heathenry truly exists and shines at its strongest is at the hearth level, at the cult, at the grassroots level, I should say, right? So at the hearth level, at the grassroots level, heathenry is, I believe, to be a very tribal focused sort of folkway, belief, religion, whatever. There are religious aspects of heathenry. I don't want to get into the minutia of what I think of that as being a meaning of, but some people will go and out on limbs and say, it's not a religion. Heathenry is not a religion. I would counter that and say that there are religious aspects of heathenry, because whenever you talk about divinity, the sacred gods, whatever, that is religion. Your spirituality is different. It extends into things of a more hearth cult practice, folklore, folk way of doing things. That's why we don't see necessarily a continuous, universal, overarching way of doing things in the different regions, whether you're talking about continental Europe or whether you're talking about later on into the northern Scandinavian countries. Things are done slightly differently in those regions. The spirituality varies. The practices vary based on the folk way of the region that you're in. The religiosity of things could be potentially rooted into some really old, deep-rooted things. But I maintain that there is religion. There is a religiosity aspect to heathenry. So in terms of there being, as a solitary practitioner, as you say, are there any collectively admired figures? You're going to get different answers from different people, unfortunately. I mean, the people that I admire and the people that I would suggest or recommend for you might might be on the radar for some other people. So I think that thus therein therein lies the paradox of the solitary practitioner, to find their own way, to find their individual uh, I don't want to say like influencers or anything like that, but I mean there's so much out there. I guess you'll if you followed Eric's stuff, the stuff that Eric does. I may have come across as a suggested content creator. I don't know how you found me here now, but I'll put some stuff at the end of this live stream down in the comments or the description area of this video for you to maybe check out when it comes to good, solid source material. I think that came up before in one of your live chats. And religion stems from Latin, the root to tie, and it is when you tie yourself willfully to a practice or a philosophy. That's been said before. What's also been said before is what religion means is that it is the ceremonial, superstitious, superstitious, ceremonial, the outward, superstitious, and ceremonial observance of a thing. There's definitely ceremony. There's definitely some things that one might ascertain as being superstitious when it comes to most religions, but it's definitely a thing. It's part of. If you're going to adopt a worldview of something, it's part of it. So skaldic works, just to get back to the topic that we were discussing, I was referring to outside of oaths. I thought I was watching something on skalds being travelers, but I could be mistaken. I used shaman as a general example for those who were similar. Yeah. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk a bit about that, just so I acknowledge everybody. Hello, David Klin, down there in Columbia, Tennessee, I believe. Good to see you again, catching a few minutes before work. Have a blessed Thanksgiving. You too as well, my friend, and thank you. So just getting back to a bit of the topic of, I wanted to try to find where I could on historical sources where the people that Blake was kind of alluding to, Skaldic Works was kind of alluding to, Volvas, Seithkona, the soothsayers. So I'm going to get into a bit of some historical stuff. So if I lose you, people that are watching, I lose you. I'm going to. That's okay. You can rewatch this. You can come back to it. But I'm going to be referencing a site that I reference a lot. So altsudu.com. Altsudu is a old Saxon word that means old ways or old traditions. And I will link this for those of you that are catching this later or want to revisit it yourselves and kind of glean from things. So there was a point in time when the soothsayers, the sort of vision tellers, right? These people who could divinate in a way and could foretell or predict or prophesy in the future. That among the Saxon tribe, at least, they were so good at it, they were so proficient in it that the Christian Franks passed a law that stated that these people were to be given into the service of the church. So once Christianity began to spread and Saxon lands became Christian through either forced or coerced conversion, these individuals of society were so good at what they were doing that they were said that they were to be given into the service of the church. And it's amazing to consider this because, again, the Franks were forced, or the Franks themselves forced Christianity on the Saxons, who had been newly conquered under Charlemagne and stuff. And they, if you didn't convert, you were put to death. You were forced you were forced to be baptized into the Christian church, and if you didn't accept, you were executed. But if you were a quote unquote soothsayer, they were recognized and seen by the church as being so prestigious that they would be spared, and you would be brought into the church to serve the church. There is a law documented under the Lex Saxorum which was a law code that the Frankish people forced upon the Saxons during the Saxon Wars in the years between like 772 804 AD. And that portion of that law code said, quote, "We have ordered that diviners and soothsayers shall be given to the church and priests." That's one section of the Lex Saxonum. Another section of the Lex Saxonum says that if anyone out of contempt for Christianity shall have despised the holy Lenten fast and shall have eaten meat, let him be punished by death. Another section says if anyone is in accordance with pagan rites shall have caused the body of a dead man to be burned and shall have reduced his bones to ashes, let him be punished by capitally. Again, there's so much that happened at this point in history with the Franks imposing these laws, that they didn't want heathenry. They didn't want the Saxons to continue their pagan ways, so much to the point that any of things that the pagans did at that time were punishable by death, save from the soothsayers and the diviners. So it's interesting to take that into consideration. One of the things that we see of examples of, like, what to Skaldic works or Blake's thing of vulvas being sort of outside of society, right? He mentions that they were outside and they would travel and they would, go to village or whatever. We see an example of this documented in the saga of Eric the Red, which was an Icelandic. It's a Scandinavian source. So chapter 4 of the saga of Eric the Red has an example of a vulva, and she was a woman named Thorbjorg. So she was in a settlement, and she was a soothsayer, according to the saga of Eric the Red. She was a soothsayer called Little Volva. She had 9 sisters, all of whom were soothsayers. And she was the only one still living. By the way, this is in chapter 4 of the saga of Eric the Red. And it goes on to say that it was Thorbjorg's custom to go to feasts in the winter, and people invited her to their home, most who wanted foreknowledge of their fate. So in this context and in this particular thing, it seems that it was a voluntary decision, of the person to be kind of outside of the normal societal structure, and then to visit during certain periods of time or at certain times of the year, to visit people's homes and to be given a sort of reading or telling of their fate or their future. In the Nornas Gestaþottr 11, another saga, Gestur tells King Olaf that when he was born, quote unquote, the Volver were traveling around the country and they prophesied men's fates. So this is another saga in which the Volva, or the Volver, plural, are depicted as being travelers, right? They don't stay in one spot particularly. They are outside of the societal structure at the time, and they go place to place. Again, in the Ynglinga saga, line 7, we see that Woden, or Odin, if you will, practices Seidr, which again is a craft that allowed Woden to learn men's fates in the future. Now, it is worth noting that at least in the Norse Scandinavian societies, Seidr was a practice that was predominantly seen as women's work. So if any man was practicing Seidr, he was a societal scourge. He was looked as Aegir, a term that kind of meant like effeminate. He wasn't looked upon with a lot of honor, with a lot of good. So yeah, that's one thing to note. Let me just catch up real quick on some comments. Maccabee Designs, hail and hello, welcome back. Seen your name pop up on a few live streams before on YouTube. Says weird that my maternal grandmother's name, Frankt, uh, Little Frank, but the or Frankie, sorry, Little Frank, but the family was observant of Jewish cultures. Yeah, the Franks were some of the earliest of the Germanic tribes to convert, with or without contention. So anyway, going back to it all, there's some terms to remember, or maybe perhaps to key in on. So in the Old Norse, during the Viking Age, right, in the Scandinavian, you have some words. We were talking about seidr, you know, this what this word means. Or you have seith kona, seith mother. Seith kona is a Old Norse word for seither woman. So seith is the thing to see into the future or whatever, to have that vision. Kona is the feminine part of that. So seith kona, seither woman. Seith mother, seith man. Mother is the man part. And then you have spå mother, spå koner, spå meaning diviner. So diviner male, diviner man, diviner woman. So spå is an Old Norse word to kind of see the future. In our modern English word, we use the word when we want to like see things that other people can't see. We say we want to spy on them. So our modern English word spy comes from this word. We also see this reflected in the Eddic poem, the Voluspa. Okay, so it is a word in its title which means the Volva's spa, the Volva's vision. So Voluspa, Volva's vision of the future, right? What the Volva sees. And these are all Germanic languages. So our modern English language is largely rooted in these Germanic languages. So another one that could be seen as soothe or soothe, which is an Old Saxon word that means thread. It's pronounced like we would say the word soothe, but it's just S-O and the D with the, looks like a D, but it's eth. It's its own specific word or letter or character, I should say, in old Germanic languages like Old English and Old Norse. I can't remember the proper term for it, but it basically means thread, and it's pronounced soothe. So our modern word for soothsayer comes from this word. Some linguists, and I'm not one, would believe that the Old Saxon word soothe is not necessarily linguistically related to the Old Norse word seith, S-E-I, with the D with the thing on it, the for thread, but largely linguists will agree that it has the same meaning. So even though they may not have linguistic roots, seith and soothe, Old English soothe, Old Norse seith, are somehow related in their meaning. Sounds very close. So we go to some old Saxon words, right? So soothsago. So soothsago meaning soothsayer or thread sayer. Soothsayo would probably be the better pronunciation of it. Soothsayo. I think the emphasis on these older Germanic words, the emphasis lands on the front syllable. So soothsayo. And the G, if you're going to write it out, it's the S-O-A-G-O, the G that we see in some of these words. It says ya. So it wouldn't be soothsago, it would be soothsayo. So soothsayer. Warsayo is another word that is Old Saxon meaning truthsayer or diviner. Volva from the Old Norse meaning the carrier of the weaving staff. So there was definitely this awareness or this understanding that these figures would have a staff or a wand that they would carry for their divinatory work. Another Saxon word or Old Saxon word that appears in specifically the Old Saxon Heliond, Orleas. This is a word that's used in the Old Saxon Heliond, Orleas weird. So the laying, Orleas, the layer or the laying, Orleas weird. For those folks that may be familiar with the term orlog or orle, Orleas is the Old Saxon word. Some might argue with the fact that this has to do with how runes are used for divination, with casting and such. But when we hear this term, when we see this appear, Orleas weird, this is a plural. So the layings of, the layering of, because the singular form of Orleas is pronounced Orle, because the G again is pronounced like a Y. And as Norse heathens in the Scandinavian practice, as things advanced and became more closer to the Viking Age, etc., Norse heathens would use the Orla or Orloi pronunciation. But Orle, again, Orlog, what you would see published or put out there with the ORLOG kind of spelling, originates as Orle. But regardless, both Seidr and Soth are meaning threads, are words tied to weird, and the shapers, the Nornir. So when you look at some of these sources, in Old Saxon sources, shapers are they're the same thing as what Old Norse or Norse heathens would portray as the Nornir. The shapers, the ones that would do the measuring out of fate, if you will, right? How the threads were tied and etc. So I'm getting a little bit into the weeds with it, and I apologize for all that. But there were a couple of sources that I mentioned there earlier that do suggest and that do support the fact that these figures of society at the time were definitely not tied to one place. They would go out. They would visit. They were not necessarily a part of society in day-to-day lives or existence, but they would come and they would go, and they would be brought in to serve people or to provide their services to people when and as they needed them. So let me get to some comments here. Scholarly Work says on YouTube, do you think that the reason it was women's work was because women are more intuitive than men? I think that definitely there is something to be said for that, just in the sense of what women do. They are bearers of life. They are the givers of life. Like, sure, men have to plant the seed in the woman, but the woman is the one that carries that seed, nurtures that growth, and then births the life that comes from the seed that the man has planted. And so I think there is a definite connection to divinity with women, in being able to just be more connected to the divine in that sort of way. And even if when we look at the portrayal of our sacred earth, we hear in many cultures, the earth referred to as a she or her, in the feminine. Jord, in the Norse and Scandinavian sources, she is feminine, the mother of Thor, Mother Earth, Mother Gaia. There's so many different cultures that represent the earth as the feminine and as the mother. So yes, I think that there is definitely a connection to the feminine divine being more in tune with that than the masculine divine. So yeah, being more intuitive, as you put it there, I would tend to agree. Same reason why there are more women psychics than there are men. Yeah, like and again, we live in such a place in such a world where these types of folks are a dime a dozen. There's charlatans. There's people that read a book or download a video or go through an online course for 8 hours or whatever, and then all of a sudden they're an expert. They got the cards, they got the discs, they got the runes, they got the I had a dream and I saw this thing and that and the other, and the next thing, all of it, they ate in a you know an abundant amount of psychedelics, and next thing you know, they're the next guru, the next expert. I'm not saying that every woman out here is you know more in tuned with the divine than the next man, but I think there's more of a propensity to connect with that side of things with women folk, because of that, because of the fact that they are the bearers of life. They are the you know life givers, life bearers. Um, so yeah, there's some other interesting things that if we look back to the depiction of these figures, weavers, um, in so many different scenarios of ritual, right? The woman's role in Germanic spirituality, in Germanic heathen spirituality specifically, right? The role of the woman, as being this, again, this frith weaver, this frith former, this weaver, the whole weaver mentality, or the whole weaver theme, to spin, right? Save and soothe, these words in Old Norse: save, Old English soothe, or Old Norse, or sorry, Old English, Old Saxon soothe, to spin, to weave. You know, um, there's a theme here. Uh, I don't think that it's a coincidence that weaving tools are often found in grave mounds alongside weapons. Um, Weaving tools suggest, at least, that it was a Save Kona or a Volva's burial mound. Um, we see those types of relics in with those types of people. One of the things that's interestingly depicted in the saga of Eric the Red, chapter 4, the Volva, who we mentioned earlier briefly in the episode here, Thorbjorg, in chapter 4 of the saga of Eric the Red, it is said that on her neck she had glass beads. On her head she had a dark hood of lambskin lined with ermine, and a staff or wand she had in her hand with a knob thereon. It was ornamented with brass and inlaid with gems round about the knob. Around her she wore a girdle of soft hair, and therein was a large skin bag, in which she kept the talismans needed to her in her wisdom. She wore hairy calfskin shoes on her feet, with long and strong-looking thongs to them, and great knobs of Latin on the ends. On her hands she had gloves of ermine skin, and they were white and hairy within. So we have a very vivid description in one of the Old Norse sagas of what a Volva would be dressed in and what she would have with her on her person. A staff or a wand is definitely there. It's definitely mentioned. Um, a, a skin bag, which she would keep full of talismans. Does that mean runes? We largely deduce that divination in Germanic societies was Some people want to contend that it wasn't runes. Others will say that it was runes. I like to lean into the fact that they were runic charms or runic symbols or runic staves. Um, so, one of the things that we can kind of take away from the fact of that, at least in the Norse society, later on, that the Volva was definitely a woman, an elderly woman, who had voluntarily released herself from her family bonds to travel. She wasn't tied to any specific service of a tribe or a kindred or a group or whatever society. She was kind of a freelance artist, if you will, but also summoned in times of crisis. Her reputation was strong, and because of that reputation, the people that would summon her knew that what was asked for came with a price. So she was compensated greatly. The description of the Volva's figure and what she was wearing, you have to think like this didn't come by happenstance. Like the gems, the furs, the this and that, like all of that came from work through compensation. And we can easily deduce and reason that to be seen or to go and be in the presence of a soothsayer or Volva was something that was done often, in both continental Saxon, Germanic societies, and later on in the Norse Scandinavian countries. It definitely was a thing. Skaldic Works' comments said it could be multiple forms of divination, such as bone reading. Like, yeah, I mean, again, we're looking at specific source materials that point to very specific forms of divination. We know for sure that the Germanic tribes had a very high regard to divination. Okay. I'm going to point a little bit now towards that because Skaldic Works, you mentioned bone readings. So there are some sources that are definitely not Christian influenced. They are pagans at the time. Tacitus being one of them. So we're going to look at some Roman writers, because the Romans at the time had, in continental lands of Germania, right? The Romans were still pagan, just like the Germanic tribes were. So their observations of things being done by the Germanic tribes were not being conveyed in any sort of Christian bias. So there are Roman writers who wrote about the Germanic tribes. Specifically, we're going to look at Strabo, mentioned in the Geographica 723, that the Germanic prophetesses were among the Cimbri, the Cimbri tribe, whose priestesses were old women dressed in white, who sacrificed prisoners of war and sprinkled their blood to prophesy coming events. This is all documented in the, and forgive my Latin or lack thereof, the Commentarali di Bellio Gallico. Okay. Very archaic, very outdated stuff. Like we're talking about killing people and prisoners of war and this and that. But anyway, they were old women. Later on, at least not very later on, but Julius Caesar himself writes in his courses, in the courses of his clashes with Germanic tribes under the Ariovastius, which is around the year 58 before the Common Era. Julius Caesar writes that among the Germans, it was the custom for their matrons, so again, feminine, to pronounce from lots and divination whether it was expedient that the battle should be engaged in or not. That they had said that, quote, that it was not the will of heaven that the Germans should conquer if they engage in battle before the new moon. Again, another example of the elder women folk being involved in divinatory practices amongst the Germanic peoples. Tacitus writes about prophetesses among the Germanic peoples in his stories 4 and 61. By ancient usage, the Germans attributed to many of their women prophetic powers, and as the superstition grew in strength, even actual divinity. So there's some wonder or question if in the eyes of the Roman and perhaps Greek pagans at the time, like Tacitus and these others, right, when they are documenting things about divinity, the gods, etc., right, that's all that they knew because that was their practice. They're documenting things from their pagan points of view. Could it have been that what the Germanic peoples were doing were offering prayers to Weird and her shapers, or the Nornir and the this and the that, right? Considering the fact that perhaps maybe Tacitus and these others didn't have a name for that. They just saw these things like Weird and the shapers, the Nornir, etc., as deities, as divinity. It could be deduced and perhaps accepted as such. Tacitus specifically records in Germania, which was around 95 after 95 AD, when he wrote his Germania. When it comes to divination, he says, for divination and the casting of lots, they, meaning the Germanic tribes that he was observing, have the highest regard. Their procedure in casting lots is always the same. This is key. They cut off a branch of a nut-bearing tree and slice it into strips. These they carve with different signs and throw them completely at random onto a white cloth. Then the priest of the state, if the consultation is a public one, or the father of the family, if it is private, offers a prayer to the gods, and looking up to the sky, picks up 3 strips, one at a time, and reads their meaning from the signs previously carved on them. If the lots forbid an enterprise, there is no deliberation that day on the matter in question. If they allow it, confirmation by the taking of auspices is required. So were those signs runes? That's the big question. Hey, Patrick Walsh, welcome. Walsh voice, Jesse! What's up, man? Patrick Walsh, my brother, watching on YouTube. Wanted to drop by and give you some love, brother. Hope you have a great time. And all you watching, you're among great men and teacher. Well, thank you, Patrick. Glad you could chime in. Yeah, we're just rocking and rolling here, man. Thank you for being here and commenting. But yeah, when it comes to divination, in the Germanic traditions and stuff, is it largely deduced that they were runes? Yes. A lot of people think that it was runes. There's an ongoing debate whether or not the signs or the carved signs that Tacitus is mentioning in his Germania are runes. But again, there is reasonable deducing that the carved signs have to be runes, because runes were, for the Saxons, for the Germanic people, for many of the Germanic tribes, alphabetic symbols, the letters. But yes, they were used as a writing system, just like we use our modern alphabet to write out our letters. So yes, primarily they were probably used first and foremost for that. But we have evidence in other sources, whether it's lore, the Eddas, the sagas, and poems, that these runic symbols were used for magical purposes, whether it was writing a spell or an incantation or something. We just don't know for sure how, if or when, like how casting runes, the runic staves, the symbols, how that casting of lots worked. We don't know. We just know that it was done. We largely accept and deduce that it was runic symbols that were used. We just don't know how it was done. So much of what modern runologists or runers or Vitkis, Voivas, right, the people that read runes, myself included, even, do today is through a reconstruction effort. We're taking information that we know of from written source material and reconstructing what we think to be or believe to be the best. And as a runer, as somebody who has read runes for dozens, if not hundreds of people at this point, I haven't kept track of how many rune readings I've done for people, but it's got to be in the dozens, if not hundreds, at this point over the years that I've done. Back to Blake from Scald Works. Back to his question: Can one person, serve or live in between multiple kindreds and tribes? I myself am oath to my own tribe. However, I live and exist independently to be a provider of a service for rune readings to my community outside of my immediate tribe. So yes, I think that it is possible. Adam Cage says HBO, Patrick. That's an inside joke. If you guys don't know, then you don't know. But it's an echoing comment back to Fire on the Mountain. So Patrick, HBO buddy, or HOB, whatever. But yeah, HBO. So yeah, I mean, can one serve? Yeah, I think that there's a place for that. Again, as long as we're talking about not infringing or not breaking any oaths that have been given or taken. If somebody were to be bound by troth, under oath to one specific group, and that oath of troth involved not performing any sort of divinatory work outside of our immediate people, and they were to do so, and despite of that, then yeah, that would be wrong, because they were breaking troth. They are breaking their oath, and that's not good. So again, without knowing the specifics of things, as long as one is not oath bound to not do such things, then sure, they can. They can act in that capacity. They can live within those, within that social construct. I feel to be able to serve, as I have done. So, yeah, I think it's all relative. That's okay. Maccabee Designs, who says, "Sorry, gotta run. Accounting office has 5 or 6 days worth of work to get done in 3 because of the holiday." Yeah, I know. We got this U.S. holiday coming up. Great to hear your lecture and musings. Enjoy your meal of thanks. Be well, everyone, and be well to you, Maccabee Designs. Thank you again so much for tuning in. But yeah, folks, I think that's going to wrap up this week's musings, or this week's Random Heathen Ramblings episode. We've gone on for just about an hour now, and I hope that Blake from Scald Works, I hope that what I was able to do in the hour was satisfying enough to answer your question, or at least inspire some conversation around it. He says that I no longer worry about joining or forming a tribe, but I allow it to happen naturally. So basically, I don't need one to be happy. Blake, I think that is, again, echoing off of the coattails, or riding off the coattails of last week's episode about tribes and kindreds, is that don't force it. Don't feel the need to force it to happen. Don't push it. It'll happen organically. And if people are putting in the work to contribute, and to feed that tree, to feed that life that is seeking to be grown, and all that. It's not something to be forced. I'm always satisfying. Well, hey, don't stroke my ego too bad there, big guy. I'm just playing. That's what she said. But anyway, no, I gotta go. I think that was a good. I think that was a good wrap up comment there. I don't expect to always be satisfied. You can't be operating at 100% all the time. You know what I mean? You got to leave some segments of wonder and mystery, to the whatever. But yeah, that is this week's episode, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for all of you tuning in. There's a little bit of my, and by the way, I'm echoing a lot of stuff that's already been said. Much of what I shared, source material wise, has been eloquently documented and put on a website, at the altsudu.com blog. I will be posting those links down below after this episode is done streaming. But if you just go to altsudu.com and go to their search function and search, soothsayers, runes, holidays, whatever, you're going to find so many blog articles that they've put out that point to source material. So thank you to altsudu.com for being an easily accessible place to find good source material, and for folks like myself who want to look towards a more academic or historical approach to be able to know where to look. I mentioned last week, we live in an era and an age where information is easily accessible. We don't have to struggle much to find good information. So when this episode is done streaming and you go down into the description area or comment section, if you're watching this later on Patreon or listening to it later on the audio platforms, just check the show notes, check the description area for the links of where you can find some of this episode information, and then do your own diligent work, right? Search for yourselves, find the things that you're looking for. Don't stop here with what I'm saying, please. If you heard something that you haven't heard before and you want to do more research, use this maybe as a launching off point. I'm not the end all be all. There's stuff that I'm talking about that gives you a place to go and look for more things. If you want to, please do so. That's the heathen way, right? Thank you. Adam Cage says good night, and as always, works of wisdom. Yeah, man. Thank you, man. We appreciate you too, Adam, with what you do for your work in the Middle Tennessee area, the work that you do with Nashville Pagan Pride and Puff and just other heathen and pagan factions of the area that are inclusive. You're doing good work too, brother. So thank you for what you do. All right, everybody. So that's been this week's episode. I appreciate all of your support. If you like this episode, please, when it does air on the platforms that you do catch it on, if you're not watching this live, upvote it, like it, react to it. If you are watching this right now and you're still here on the live stream, please give it a react, give it an upvote, give it a thumbs up, give it a heart, share around, high five me, slap me on the ass, whatever the heck you want to do. Show your love and appreciation any way that you can. It's much appreciated. And until we talk to each other again, thank you to all my patrons on Patreon that help make this content possible. Thank you to all my listeners and viewers that tune in and contribute in the ways that you do. I greatly appreciate you. Until we see and hear from each other again, may the gods continue to notice you, and may your ancestors smile upon you. We'll see you in the next one.